All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for ranked contest in the SEC between Alabama and Missouri, going down Saturday at noon on ABC. Bama 3.5 point favorites, 55.5 is the total from Columbia. Getting things started with that Bama offense on the Tiger defense. This is an Alabama offense that's in high gear right now when it comes to throwing the football. Ryan Grubb after week one was really able to get his quarterback Ty Simpson in sync, and he's been highly accurate ever since, completing on the year now 70% of his passes, about 1,500 pass yards, 13 touchdowns. He did have that one interception against Vanderbilt, but it was a force on fourth down where, what else are you going to do? Just eat the play or throw it and give your receiver a shot. So that pick really wasn't even that bad. He's been very good at protecting the football. The only negatives really is that he has been trying to evade pressure a lot, and sometimes he'll eat sacks, but he's also very good at finding the open guy on the run where he can just stop on a dime and throw it downfield, showcasing a lot of arm strength. He has some mobility that can really make you pay too. Certainly not the fastest of guys by any means, but he can hurt you on third downs and especially in the red zone if it calls for it. So Simpson right now has been playing out of his mind. He's got a great trio of pass catchers that work with Gurmy Bernard. He continues to be the best receiver for this offense. This guy's been incredibly consistent dating back to last year, leading the way with 392 yards. He's also got 5 touchdowns on the season. Ryan Williams, a guy who's been vastly inconsistent, but also an incredibly talented player. 98-yard contest against Vanderbilt. He did have a drop touchdown against Georgia and Wisconsin, but he still had a buck 65 and 2 scores against Wisconsin. But still trying to work out some of those inconsistencies in his game. But he's been phenomenal for them downfield for the most part. Isaiah Horton, he's also starting to find his rhythm. Early on in the season, a little bit quiet, but now he's got 4 straight games of 48 plus yards, and he's had season highs 65 and then 66 against Georgia and Vanderbilt. So Isaiah Horton's really molding into that number 3 quite well. I think Josh Cuevas is a really respectable tight end as well. So this pass game's deadly. They've been very tough on third down. They attack zone coverage better than anybody maybe in the country. And then, of course, they're incredibly difficult to hold up against in man. Uh, Offense is pretty much one-dimensional, I would say. I know that the run game, got going against Vanderbilt. Jam Miller coming back, showcasing his vision. They were able to establish some physicality in that first half. Second half, not as much. Then he had that 30-yard touchdown to seal the deal there on the final play of the game to come away with a 30-14 victory. But this rushing attack, last year you've seen it too from the running backs, is just not that great. I'm not convinced it's fully fixed either. I mean, we still only had 150 yards rushing in that game for less than 4 yards per attempt. Jam, I think, had about over 6. Other guys get involved like Kevin Riley. A.K. Deer hasn't played much, and he's the third leading rusher. So it's really just those two guys. Riley and Miller, now that Jam is back and healthy. But I still think this is a pretty one-dimensional offense until further notice, and they're going to have to prove against a really good run defense that they can establish that type of balance on a weekly basis. In Missouri, I know they played some weaker opponents, but they did play South Carolina and Kansas. The SC run game has been pretty weak this year. They can still hurt you if you're not on your pivot, and they held them to -9 yards with all the sacks they were able to generate. And then Kansas, I thought this was impressive, 31 yards on 19 attempts. I mean, they put those running backs completely in check. And Kansas abandoned the run game early. I really don't know why, but they did. But it really wasn't working for them. The QB run from Daniels wasn't very effective either. It was a very interesting game from Missouri's defense, at least from being able to make them one-dimensional. The Missouri pass defense, last year was a big problem. They really struggled to defend. They were giving up a lot of big plays, a lot of free space. And this year they've been better. Certainly far from perfect, but they've been prone to allowing some big plays, especially against South Carolina, where they're giving up big chunk plays. This is a group that gets everybody back, though, from last year. Toriano Pride, Dre Norwood, Stephen Hall has emerged as a new starter in the secondary. He's playing well. Dalen Carnell, a vet in the slot, has been really strugglesome as a tackler, but in coverage he's really doing his thing. And then Marvin Burks, Jalen Catamon, a really good safety duo. I think they've been really the mainstays back here so far this year. And they've been good against the run as well. It's going to be tough trying to defend this defense or this offense that is for the secondary because they can certainly utilize these pass catchers in a variety of different ways. They can attack you downfield. For Missouri, though, it's just not allowing those big plays, right? If you can keep everything in front of you and force Alabama to march downfield, which they've proven they can, they'll be in for a pretty respectable game. For Missouri, their defensive line has been playing quite well. They've also really improved. Zion Young, 6 tackles for loss. Damon Wilson, the transfer, has been a pretty good pass rusher. He's got 3.5 sacks. He hasn't been as effective against the tougher opponents, but still seeing some progress from these guys. It's nice because last year it was a bit of an iffy unit. I know they played well, but they lost a lot of very important players, and I think that's why coming into the season it was very questionable for Missouri. and I think they'll do well against the run in this game, though. I think Josiah Trotter, the linebacker, has been elite for them. The West Virginia transfer has been phenomenal. 28 tackles, 6 tackles for loss. He's not cracked against the run. Nicholas Rodriguez is alongside him. Khalil Jacobs as well. It's a new look defense for sure, but I think they've been playing very well. Chris McClellan at defensive tackle has also been highly impressive for them over the last couple of years. This is a guy you can count on usually on the interior to make plays. So the Missouri defense, it's a group that disappointed drastically last year, and they didn't play many tough opponents, and they still struggled. This is going to be the toughest opponent to date yet, but I think they have enough components to be able to play a very respectable game. I think Nate Johnson's a pass rush specialist. You might see get a longer leash in games like this as well. Alabama, though, their offensive line has been much better. You've seen a lot of inconsistencies from their pass protection over the last year plus. And the last couple games they've been really good. Against Georgia and then against Vanderbilt. Caden Proctor is really holding down his zone. He's even getting involved with some touches on offense as well as a runner and pass catcher. Even kind of crazy, right? But he's been good. A lot of sides at left tackle. Cam Dewberry, I really hope he's accomplished at left guard. Parker Brailsford, not in the run game hasn't been as sound, but in pass protection's really finding his footing. And Gino Van Denmark at right guard, been very good. And then right tackle has been a bit of an issue for them. Wilkin Formby was kicked inside for last game, and that let Michael Carroll, the five-star freshman, played a lot of right tackle. We'll see if that continues because right tackle is a struggle-some area for them. It wasn't, over the last 2 weeks, much of a problem. But I think they have two respectable options if Formby can continue to play that well, and then Carroll hit a pretty strong game. And I think what was pretty much his main debut here now in the SEC. I guess he played about 30 snaps against Georgia or so, but against Vanderbilt in Georgia he looked very sound. So we'll see if that continues with that two-man rotation at right tackle. Moving to the other side of things, the Missouri offense gets its biggest test of the year against the Crimson Tide defense. Missouri's been very good this year at establishing balance and staying consistent with it. This is a team that I think is pretty legit when it comes to their offense. Their toughest two opponents, Kansas and South Carolina, had 450-plus yards on both of them with great balance. I think this is a rushing attack that's really going to be the headline. Ahmad Hardy coming over from ULM, and he's been great. 730 yards, 9 touchdowns for him. He's been very elusive, showcasing nice speed at 210 pounds as well. I mean, he's highly efficient, ripping off an incredible amount of big plays. Even in SEC play, he hasn't really had much of a struggle, even though it was just the one game against South Carolina. He had 6+ yards per attempt in that one. Jamal Roberts has done a good job this year spelling him. Also has 7 yards per attempt. He had a big long run for like 70 yards against Kansas that helped put that game away. He had another good run against South Carolina as well. This is a rushing attack that has a nice 1-2 punch, and they have a quarterback, of course, who's very good and savvy as a runner. And Bayou Perbola, his numbers haven't been all that great. Only 121 in 3 scores, but he had 72 rushing against South Carolina. That's his season high. He's a guy that can really hurt you when things break down, and they haven't been calling as many design QB runs as I'd probably like to see. But they haven't really had to. Trying to keep their quarterback's legs fresh. Only one game this year of 10+ attempts. And I think in a game like this, you could certainly look to see him utilized a lot more in the run game because they're going to want to slow things down, give their defense a bit of an assist. And they're going to be able to do that with this run game because you're facing a run defense. It's been a really struggle. It's been a big-time struggle for Alabama this year. Against Florida State, you saw much of what you saw last year, and that was get annihilated when it comes to downhill running. And then when you see a lot of misdirection and motion with the quarterback run implemented, they can't defend on the boundary either. Georgia, they didn't really have much of QB run, and they still had explosive plays for 227 yards. Vanderbilt had the long 60+ yard rushing touchdown, and then they just abandoned the run for some reason. They ended the game with only 19 attempts. They didn't look to run the football at all, and I don't know why, because this is a defense that's not very good at stopping the run despite having an incredible amount of talent in that front seven. They've just not been very sound in that regard over, DeBoer's entire tenure here under Kane Womack as the coordinator. They still have a lot of talent, though. LT Overton, probably their best pass rusher. Jan Zapier, those are going to be the two guys that come off the edge the most. Edric Hill, James Smith, Jordan Renaud as well. It's a defensive line that I still think is lacking when it comes to playing its best football. Tim Keenan coming back, though, should really help as the year goes on, I think, when it comes to stopping the run. Deontay Lawson, Justin Jefferson. Jefferson's been sound in coverage. Lawson's been the standout against the run a little bit better. This is a group that I've also been a little concerned with. I thought I certainly could have been playing better football. Nakia Hill-Green had a missed tackle near the goal line against Vanderbilt. So this is a group that's also not playing its best football, and they can continue to progress. Lawson, of course, is going to be the standout leader in the middle. He's tremendous all around. I think the secondary for Alabama, I don't think Damani Jackson's all that great of a cover corner. He's been pretty poor against the run as well. Run fits from the secondary have been less than ideal, even from Bray Hubbard, who has had some elite games. He's had some poor ones, but I think overall he can be your best player in the secondary. He's great at forcing turnovers, laying the boom. He's really the tone setter if you've ever seen one for a football team. Keon Sabb does very well at complementing him back in at safety, and then Deshaun Jones, he'll be anchoring the slot. He hasn't been as talked about it much. Hasn't been doing too much. He's been playing respectable football at the end of the day when they're in those 5 DB sets, those nickel and dime packages. For Missouri, this is a team that has pass catchers that can make you pay. You look at Kevin Coleman; he's been more of a possession pass catcher this year. 8 receptions per game for about 80 yards. He had 12 for 108 against Massachusetts, bouncing back after a rough game against South Carolina, where he kind of took a back seat to some of the other guys that were getting involved. Brett Norfleet, Marquise Johnson was really the standout in that game with 80 yards. You also have Joshua Manning, those 12 receptions. So it's not the deepest of groups, but I think they have enough weapons here that can really complement what this rushing attack does, which is almost 300 yards per game. Coleman, though, he's going to command a lot of targets against Kansas. He had 10 for 126. He's a slasher out of the slot. Improbola, of course, you can't go without talking about him. He's been pretty good this year. 1,200 yards passing, 9 touchdowns. Does have 3 interceptions, 1 in each of the last 3 games. He was highly efficient, though, in his last outing against UMass. Not as much against South Carolina or Louisiana. They weren't able to top 200 yards passing in that one. But against Kansas, man, they showed unreal amounts of balance in that one. 334 and 3 touchdowns. This is a good quarterback. This is a guy I think is a very underrated dual threat athlete, a guy that has been accurate across the middle of the field as well. Does have some turnover problems and might take some sacks every here now and then. So I think those are kind of the issues with him. It's the toughest defense he's going to face this year, but I think in terms of that balance, they're going to be able to establish that against Bama. I just don't think they can stop the downhill run, and I think when they get Barbola out on the edge, he's going to be able to keep them ahead of the sticks, and then I think they have guys that can attack downfield to the pass game as well, so I think it's going to be a respectable outing. I'm just not that sold on the Bama defense where they were able to come up with 2 turnovers in the red zone against Vanderbilt. They were able to come up with some 4th down stops against Georgia, and they got bailed out by a drop touchdown. I mean, this has just not been that polished of a defense, and they should have gave up a long passing touchdown against Wisconsin, but it was an underthrown ball, and they also were able to force some turnovers in that one. So this defense is certainly alarming. If they can continue to come up with those 4th down stops and create turnovers, they're going to be great, right? Because that's the name of the game. Survive in advance and do what you're good at, and that's coming up with those short yardage situations and those turnovers, and that's how they've been winning games. But I think in terms of giving up yards, this is a defense that's not very good at creating negative plays. The pass rush has been less than desirable, only 7 sacks this year. And so I think they're probably going to struggle in this game more so than not. The Tiger offensive line is still going to be down Caden Green at left tackle, which is an issue because Javen Richardson has not been that polished in pass pro in his absence. So I think left tackle is a spot that they could look to attack. I think the rest of the group's pretty good, though. Dominic Guidance at left guard. You have Connor Tullison, a veteran at center. Curtis Plager, a new starter at right guard. He's been respectable in the right tackle. Keegan Tross, he's been elite, one of the top tackles in football at this moment in time. So the offensive line, they should do well in this matchup. I think the left tackle spot is still a very big concern, though. You want to hope that they can get some help from that spot. Jamal Roberts hasn't been all that good in pass protection. He's allowed to sack this year, so they're going to look to put 2 guys on his side of the field potentially, then that could be something that Alabama could take advantage of to create one-on-one opportunities across the rest of the offensive line. So I think you could potentially see some blitzes from those athletic linebackers that get downhill and create some negative plays that way. And that's if Richardson really does struggle like he has been the last couple weeks. If he can hold up well, I think it's going to make things a lot tougher for them. But the pass protection can be exploited by Alabama. It'll be interesting to see how they can attack that matchup overall. That leads us to the final analysis in the prediction. I'm going to take Missouri outright in this one. I think Alabama just kind of remains a one-dimensional team where the run game, yeah, they looked good last week, but the theme is that they're not very good. I don't know if they're going to be able to do well against Missouri. I think this is a much better front than Vanderbilt possessed. I think the linebackers are also much more impressive. They should be able to do their thing through the air, even though the secondary has improved. Simpson does a great job of taking care of the football, knows where he wants to go. They can do a great job of creating matchups for these receivers that are favorable. But I just think overall the Missouri balance on offense is going to be too much for the Tide to defend because I just think this defense is a bit of a liability for them. And eventually the luck's going to run out. They're going to have to do more of forcing punts and not creating turnovers and winning in short yardage situations. And I think Missouri, they're going to do a great job of staying ahead of the sticks and they'll be more flawless in the red zone. They're going to walk away with a home victory here to put themselves into the top 10. So that's going to be it for today's episode. If you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.